You weren't meant to find this by accident. The fact that you are here watching this in this exact moment is not a coincidence to be dismissed or rationalized away. It is in itself one of the signals. Something in you recognized a pattern before your mind could name it. Something in the field of your life. Your timing, your attention, your readiness brought you to the edge of the message at precisely the point you could receive it. And that matters because your quantum breakthrough is not approaching like a distant horizon you must chase. It is already anchored. What you are experiencing right now, this final phase, does not belong to preparation. It belongs to confirmation, not spiritual optimism, not hopeful thinking, not a performance of positivity. This is the lived signature of completion, the moment when a reality stops being an idea you visit in meditation and begins to take its place as the structure you live inside. When reality shifts from one state to another, it does not happen in silence. Even when the external world looks unchanged, the internal architecture begins to rearrange. It leaves traces. It creates ripples. It presses on the edges of the old configuration until the old cannot maintain its shape. You are here because those ripples have reached you. You are sensing the movement not because you are imagining it, but because you are located inside the turning mechanism. Over the next stretch of time, I want to decode 3 unmistakable markers of what I call the Quantum Finalization Sequence. We will not merely name them. We will explore why they emerge, what they mean, and how they behave. Most importantly, I will give you a framework to engage the process consciously, to shift from being someone swept along by the current to becoming the navigator who understands the current and guides the final approach into a transformed existence. To grasp the mechanics, we need a useful metaphor drawn from physics: quantum decoherence. In scientific terms, decoherence describes how a system that can exist in many potential states becomes pinned into one definite outcome through interaction with its environment. In spiritual terms, you can hold it as a mirror. The field of possibility collapses into a lived reality through contact with choices, attention, emotion, behavior, and the subtle patterns you repeat until they become structure. Picture a photograph emerging in chemical solution. At first, there is only potential, an invisible image waiting in the paper. Then a hazy form begins to appear. For a moment, the old blankness and the new picture coexist. The image is neither fully absent nor fully present. It is becoming, and then gradually the details sharpen. The previous emptiness dissolves into the background as the new form claims definition. This is where you are. You are watching the new version of your life crystallize while the previous one dissolves. That is why you feel restless. Not because you are doing something wrong, but because you are positioned inside the machinery of manifestation. You sense proximity and distance at the same time because the transformation is, in a real sense, 99% complete, but the remaining 1%, the final settling, the last locking of the bolts, is where the intensity concentrates. The closer a system is to tipping, the more it trembles. Now let me be direct about the particular suffering of this concluding phase, because it is a kind of spiritual anguish that rarely gets acknowledged. It is the experience of running a marathon and finally seeing the finish line, yet with each stride it seems to remain the same distance away. You are caught in an oscillation between moments of absolute certainty where you can almost inhabit your transformed reality and moments of suffocating doubt that make you question the entire journey. It can feel brutal. It can feel humiliating. It can make you wonder whether you have been faithful for nothing. You notice small indicators, meaningful coincidences, subtle confirmations. A lyric that speaks directly to you. A repeated number sequence. A conversation you did not plan that lands exactly on the theme you have been carrying privately. A sudden opening where there was always a wall. And then your current circumstances surge back into view. An unpaid bill, a difficult interaction. A moment in the mirror where you feel like the person you are trying to leave behind. The old narrative grabs your collar and tries to drag you back into its familiar room. And then there is the weariness, bone-deep exhaustion, the sensation that you cannot maintain the elevated state for even one more moment. You have been committed, intentional. You have meditated, scripted, visualized, affirmed until your consciousness felt strained. And now you are depleted. You feel the seductive pull to release everything, not into your new reality, but back into your old one, simply because it is known, and the known demands less sustained effort. Listen carefully. These sensations are not evidence of failure. They are not proof you missed the mark. They are anticipated responses of the finalization sequence. They are the resistance generated when a higher frequency reality presses against the mechanisms of a lower one and forces its dissolution. When the new structure begins to carry more coherence than the old structure, the old does not politely step aside. It makes noise. It produces static. It attempts to reassert the identity you have outgrown. This brings us to the three markers. The first marker is turbulence at the edges, disruption, friction, and destabilization in places that once felt fixed. This can look like sudden delays, unexpected conflict-shifting plans, old attachments flaring, or a strange sense that the external world is testing you. But what is really happening is structural reorganization. When a system is about to change states, it often enters a period of instability. The turbulence is not a sign you are off path. It is the sound of the old framework losing its grip. The second marker is heightened synchronicity, a density of meaningful alignment that feels too precise to be random. You meet the right person at the right time. Information finds you before you search for it. Doors open without your usual forcing, or equally important, doors close cleanly, as if removed by an invisible hand. Synchronicities are not decorations. They are navigational beacons. They appear because your inner frequency and your outer trajectory are coming into stronger coherence, and coherence produces patterns. The third marker is the paradoxical stillness, the quiet zone that arrives after turbulence, where everything pauses and you are left with space that can feel like emptiness. This is the marker that confuses most people because stillness can resemble stagnation. You may feel like nothing is happening. You may feel unmotivated, detached, even numb. But this stillness is often the final equalization, the moment a new reality gathers itself before it takes visible form. In the photograph metaphor, it is the breath between hazy outline and crisp definition. If you recognize these markers, turbulence, synchronicity, and stillness, then you are not in the early chapters of change. You are at the threshold of consolidation. Now we need the framework because knowledge without orientation becomes anxiety. Here is how you engage consciously. First, stop treating your feelings as verdicts. In this phase, emotion is not a reliable judge. It is a weather system moving through a shifting climate. You must learn to witness exhaustion, doubt, and impatience without turning them into prophecy. Say, this is a sensation, not a sentence. That single distinction prevents the old paradigm from hijacking your interpretation. Second, stabilize your nervous system as a spiritual practice. If the new reality is a higher coherence, then calm is not passivity. It is alignment. Breathe to signal safety. Sleep to support integration. Simplify inputs. Protect your attention. In the finalization sequence, overstimulation is fuel for the old identity. Regulation is the language your body uses to accept the new life. Third, shift from forcing to calibrating. Imagine your breakthrough as an enormous quantum vault. The door is reinforced, massive, sealed. The work you invested over months or years, the shadow work, the releasing, the embodiment, the visualization was you entering the combination. Number by number, you turned the mechanism, sensed engagement, advanced to the next digit. You completed the sequence. Your task now is not to keep spinning numbers in panic. Your task is to witness what the correct sequence activates. Because when the right combination enters a high security mechanism, an internal system initiates. Deep within the structure, components begin aligning. Bolts shift, gears move, and as each component locks into its designated position, it produces a resonance, an unmistakable click. The chaos, the synchronicities. These are the clicks. They are the audible verification that the mechanism is completing its cycle. The pressure you feel is the force accumulating just before the bolts withdraw. It is the final resistance of a door that is about to open. And if you understand that, you stop pressing your ear to cold metal in anxious hope and begin standing back as a grounded observer who recognizes the pattern instinctively. Finally, act from arrival, not from desperation. In this phase, the most powerful action is often small, precise, and calm. Choose the behavior your future self would do today. Not the grand gesture meant to prove worthiness, but the steady step that signals identity. Keep promises to yourself. Speak differently. Hold boundaries. Make decisions as if the new reality is already the base you stand on, not the prize you chase. To comprehend what is unfolding, you must embrace a challenging truth. Transformation is not a single event. It is an unfolding process. It is not an instant flip from darkness into light. It is the gradual and sometimes disorienting transition where one star descends below the horizon as another rises, creating a period where shadows stretch and forms look ambiguous. Your present reality has been a stable wave configuration, familiar, rehearsed, reinforced by years of repetition. Your work has initiated a new wave, a new frequency. And now for a time both waves overlap. That overlap is not confusion. It is the threshold. It is the blended state where the old is dissolving and the new is sharpening. So if you feel tired, it is because your system is integrating. If you feel doubt, it is because the old narrative is making its last argument. If you feel stillness, it is because the field is settling into coherence. And if you are here right now drawn to this message, it is because the finalization sequence is already in motion. The breakthrough is not merely approaching. It has been established. You are not waiting for life to change. You are observing the final mechanical expression of a reality you have already generated. Your role now is simple, and it is sacred. Recognize the clicks, remain steady, and let the door open. That new wave configuration, the reality you intended, the life you have been tuning toward, did not arrive as something loud. It began as a barely perceptible signal, a quiet resonance underneath the static of your previous existence. At first it was easy to doubt it because subtle transmissions are easy to dismiss. It felt like a fleeting intuition, a brief moment of clarity, a strange sense of this is the direction, followed immediately by the familiar weight of the old. But you did not abandon it. You nourished it with attention. You invested emotion into it. You began to embody it in small, unglamorous ways. Choices made without applause, boundaries held without explanation, prayers whispered when nothing seemed to move. And because you fed it consistently, the signal strengthened. It amplified. It became coherent enough to carry force. What was once a faint frequency became a transmission strong enough to contest the old one for dominance. That is why this phase feels the way it does. The instability you're living inside is not random punishment. It is the predictable outcome of two realities attempting to occupy the same space in your life at once. It is the interval of interference. Imagine two powerful sound waves intersecting. They do not simply merge into something smooth and pleasant. They generate an additional pattern, sometimes discordant, sometimes unsettling. In some moments, the overlap becomes constructive interference. Everything feels intensified, enchanted, almost too vivid to be ordinary. Your intuition spikes. Your timing becomes precise. You feel strangely protected. Then, without warning, the overlap becomes destructive interference. Energy neutralizes motivation, collapses clarity, blurs into disorientation. It can feel like silence. It can feel like numbness. It can feel like you have lost the signal entirely. This is the disturbance you sense in your existence. This is the turbulence that makes you question whether you are progressing or regressing. One moment you receive a clear transmission from your future, a synchronicity, a revelation, a surge of certainty so strong it feels like memory. The next moment you are flooded by the static of the previous reality. Old anxieties, old patterns, old constraints, the familiar gravitational pull of what you used to call normal. It is like turning the dial to a new station and hovering between channels, catching fragments of the new broadcast while the old broadcast fights to stay on the air. This interval is not evidence the process has stalled. It is confirmation the process is active and powerful. If nothing were changing, you would not feel interference. You would simply remain in the old signal without contradiction. Interference happens precisely because a reconstruction is underway in real time. This complete progression is what I call the Quantum Finalization Sequence. It is not a mystical examination designed to test your worth. It is a governed progression, a natural methodology by which a new reality becomes stable, unified, and energetically sustainable before it becomes your primary lived experience. A mature transformation does not arrive as a fragile fantasy you must constantly defend. It arrives as a structure capable of holding you, and this sequence functions as a protective mechanism. It prevents a collapse, prevents you from stepping into a reality your nervous system cannot yet stabilize, prevents an abrupt rupture that would overwhelm your psyche and fragment your life. The finalization sequence moves through 3 distinct stages, each with its own signature, and each easily misread by the mind that has been trained to survive. Stage 1 is dissolution, the methodical deconstruction of the energetic framework of your previous reality. This is the stage people fear most because it often looks like loss. Something ends. Something breaks. Something that seemed permanent no longer holds. A role you built your identity around dissolves. A relationship that shaped your sense of self disintegrates. A belief system you relied upon fractures into pieces. Your survival mechanism screams catastrophe because it interprets endings as danger. It processes dissolution as failure, as proof you are moving away from what you want. But the quantum interpretation reveals a different truth. The high-frequency field of your new reality acts as a dissolving agent. It is energetically incompatible with coexisting alongside dense low-frequency structures that belong to the timeline you are leaving. The job, the relationship, the belief, these were not merely things in your life. They were tethers. They were anchors to an older configuration. They required dissolution not because you were being punished, but because the new reality cannot fully install while the old scaffolding remains intact. In other words, it is not simply loss. It is deliberate demolition of what cannot come with you. The old dimension may appear to resist, but what you are hearing is not resistance in the moral sense. It is the sound of dismantling. It is the creaking of beams being removed. It is the collapse of a structure that has reached the end of its usefulness. If you reflect on recent disruption, an unexpected ending, a sudden shift, a breakdown of certainty, consider what changes when you contextualize it not as a reversal, but as necessary deconstruction. What shifts when you understand that the old infrastructure must be removed for the new architecture to stand. Stage 2 is frequency verification, the phase where the new reality begins sending exploratory signals like sonar to calibrate its pathway into your awareness. This is where synchronicities often intensify. You hold an intention for a new vocation, and suddenly everyone you meet seems to work in that field. You contemplate moving, and the city's name appears repeatedly in conversations and headlines, on signs, in unexpected places. You think of an opportunity and then overhear the exact language you've been using spoken by a stranger. It feels uncanny, as if the world is responding to a script you did not share. A consciousness trained to perceive life as random will try to downplay this. It will call it coincidence or selective attention. It will say you're just noticing it because you want it, and sometimes you will agree with that voice because it feels safer to reduce meaning than to face the responsibility of receiving it. But these are not merely coincidences. They are transmissions. Your future reality is integrating its symbols into your environment to normalize their presence. It is establishing pathways before the full arrival. Like rails being laid down before the train enters the station, the field begins to populate your perception with the language, the people, the patterns, and the openings that match the incoming life. It is not yet the final materialization, but it is the verification that the bridge between timelines is becoming structurally sound. Stage 3 is zero-point recalibration, the most misunderstood stage of all. This is the interval where everything seems to halt. Inspiration evaporates. Synchronicities quiet down. Chaos diminishes. There's no obvious forward motion, only stillness, emptiness, neutrality. Sometimes it feels like boredom. Sometimes it feels like grief without a clear object. Sometimes it feels like a blank page that refuses to fill. Your survival mechanism interprets this as ultimate failure. It whispers you severed the connection. You lost the signal. You chose wrong. The universe abandoned you. The mind equates silence with absence, emptiness with danger, stillness with termination. But from a quantum perspective, this stage is the most sacred moment in the process. It is the silence between inhale and exhale. It is the instant the previous reality has fully dematerialized and the new one is accumulating energy just beyond perception. It is a system initialization. It is the clearing of the field so the new structure can install cleanly. The void is not punishment. It is space that cannot be filled by the old without sabotaging the integrity of the new. When you understand this configuration, you begin to see why the transition feels tormenting. Almost every true indicator of advancement is systematically misinterpreted by conditioned consciousness as evidence of failure. Dissolution feels like loss. Verification feels like teasing. Zero-point stillness feels like abandonment. The pain is not only in what is happening, it is in what your fear says it means. And this recognition forces a profound shift in your methodology. Your work is no longer to repair every complication that surfaces. The job ending is not a problem you must immediately patch out of panic. The emptiness is not a void you must rush to occupy with distractions or substitute relationships. The synchronicities are not clues you must chase frantically, as if your salvation depends on decoding every sign perfectly. These events are not happening to you as random disruptions. They are structured signals. They are the data points of a larger transition. They are encoded transmissions from the reality you are moving into, verifying that its arrival is not hypothetical, but actively scheduled within the mechanics of your life. So your new directive is this: stop being the victim of the storm and become the interpreter of the weather. A victim experiences thunder and assumes the world is ending. A meteorologist hears thunder and reads it as atmospheric movement, pressure systems, shifting conditions, changing in predictable ways. The meteorologist does not worship the storm and does not panic at it. They translate it. They understand what it signifies, how long it lasts, what comes next. Translate your signals the same way. When chaos appears, ask what is dissolving, what structure is being dismantled because it cannot coexist with where I am going. When synchronicity appears, ask what pathway is being revealed, what symbol is being introduced to normalize my future. When stillness appears, ask what is being recalibrated, what is being cleared so the installation can be clean, and then practice the one behavior that stabilizes every stage. Hold your center, not through frantic effort, but through coherent presence. Let dissolution complete without clinging. Let verification unfold without chasing. Let the 0 point breathe without forcing it to end. The mind will demand urgency. The nervous system will demand certainty. But the deeper intelligence of transformation is asking for trust with discernment, a calm willingness to let the mechanism finish what you have already activated. Every instance of chaos can be verification. Every loss can be verification. Every silence can be verification. Stop trying to rebuild the old structure while the new one is being constructed around you. Instead, begin reading the architecture. Because when you can interpret the clicks, you no longer fear them. You recognize them as the sound of the bolts withdrawing, and you know with quiet certainty that the door is opening. This shift in interpretation changes everything. It lifts you out of resistance and places you inside allowance. It ends the struggle not by denying what you feel, but by giving what you feel a new meaning. It dissolves fear because you finally recognize that the unsettling indicators are not obstacles on your path. They are the path itself. They are the mechanics of transition made visible. They are the sound of the old structure coming apart and the new one locking into place. For years, perhaps for most of your life, you have operated under one draining assumption that your breakthrough is something you are still constructing. You have lived like a vault technician on your knees, awareness pressed against cold steel, listening for the final click, terrified that a single wrong movement will reset the mechanism and erase your progress. You have believed your job is to keep entering the combination, to keep applying force, to keep holding the frequency through sheer white-knuckle determination. And that belief has been the source of your depletion. It is the foundation of your uncertainty. It is the hidden engine of your anxiety. Because if you believe you are still building the breakthrough, then every fluctuation feels like danger. Every doubt feels like sabotage. Every emotional dip feels like failure. You end up policing your thoughts, monitoring your mood, measuring your day, as if one imperfect moment could undo years of devotion. That is not spiritual mastery. It is spiritual exhaustion. And it is fundamentally inaccurate. We are arriving now at the central revelation of this entire transmission. The one paradigm shift that once fully absorbed will alter not merely what you do, but who you are while you do it. Take a breath and receive this not only with your mind, but with the intelligence of your body. The paradox is simple. You believe you are still generating the breakthrough. The truth is, the generative act is already complete. The instant you first genuinely embodied the energetic signature of your new reality, the felt sense of the wish fulfilled the inner certainty that it is already yours. You collapse the wave function. In that instant, in the realm of potential, where realities are authorized, the decision was established. The architecture was approved. The command was transmitted and accepted. The combination was not simply entered, it was secured. What you are experiencing now is not the act of generation. It is the delay, what it feels like when dense three-dimensional reality synchronizes to a quantum event that has already occurred. It is the reverberation of thunder that has already cracked through the sky. It is light from a star that already ignited, finally reaching your eyes after traveling through distance you cannot perceive. Your work is not to keep generating thunder. Your work is to observe the reverberation as it moves through your landscape. And if you have been wondering what happens right before materialization, what the final moments feel like, this is the critical piece. You shift from trying to make it happen to recognizing it has happened. When that information integrates, it changes how you navigate these final stages at every level. First, it means your job is no longer to maintain the vibration by force. This is the guidance that has created more spiritual depletion than almost anything else. The idea that you must hold a frequency continuously with conscious effort. You cannot. Not as a human being with a nervous system, a job, a body. A world. Trying to hold it constantly is like trying to keep a beach ball submerged underwater with your hands. You can do it for a while. You can strain. You can sweat. But it will exhaust you, and the moment your grip loosens, it will surge upward, and you will interpret that surge as failure rather than physics. The relief is knowing you do not have to keep the beach ball down. The new reality already generated at the quantum level maintains itself. Your task is not to manufacture it from nothing each day. Your task is to return to the knowing of it, to remember it, to align with it again and again when you forget. That is not weakness. It is the rhythm of embodiment. You can release the ball. It will surface on its own. And when it surfaces, you do not panic. You simply witness what is already true. Second, it means the indicators you are seeing, chaos, synchronicities, emptiness, are not a test of worthiness. They are not a cosmic reward system watching to see if you react correctly. That interpretation is a projection of human conditioning onto a system that is far more organized and benevolent than fear can imagine. The indicators are not moral exams. They are mechanics. They are transitional residue. They are the visible byproducts of one configuration dissolving and another crystallizing. Think of them like tracking notifications for a package already shipped. The notification is not asking whether you deserve the delivery. It is simply reporting the movement dispatched in transit arriving soon. There is no judgment attached. There is only process. Now consider this quietly. What if the breakthrough you have been pursuing is not something you must generate in the future, but a quantum event that has already occurred and is now revealing itself to you in stages? Let that idea permeate your body. Let it soften the tightness in your chest. Let it loosen the frantic scanning of the mind. Because if it is already done, then you are not begging reality to change. You are learning to recognize the evidence of change already in motion. Third, it means you can relax for real. Not in the performative way where you pretend you are calm while gripping the inside of yourself with panic, but in a genuine way that releases the compulsive management of every thought, every sensation, every circumstance. You have been living as if one wrong movement could derail the entire process, but you have moved beyond the point of derailment. The train has already switched tracks. It is gaining momentum. You are not the engine. You are not pushing it forward with willpower. You are the passenger in a premium cabin, sensing the vibration of a journey that is already underway. This is why you feel exhausted when you try to control everything. Control is an outdated strategy from the old timeline. It is the nervous system's attempt to stay safe in a world it believes can collapse at any moment. But the new reality is not held together by your vigilance. It is held together by coherence. And coherence is sustained through calm presence, not constant correction. Fourth, it means any perceived reversal is often evidence of advancement. This is the part that will transform how you interpret sudden breakdowns. When something in your previous life crumbles unexpectedly, a plan, a role, a relationship, a certainty, you are not necessarily failing. You may be witnessing the demolition of structures that cannot exist on the new timeline. If the new frequency is strong enough, it will fracture the old construct simply by being incompatible. The old foundation breaks, not because you are unworthy, but because it cannot support the architecture you are installing. The reversal is not a step backward. It is the sound of an outdated floor giving way, so a stronger one can be laid. This is why so many breakthroughs are preceded by endings that feel cruel until you see what they made room for. And finally, fifth, it means you cannot do it wrong at this stage. Receive that. Let it land without argument. You cannot execute it incorrectly. The fear of self-sabotage is the last phantom of the old paradigm. It is the mind's final attempt to preserve a familiar identity, the one who must struggle, must prove, must earn. It convinces you that one moment of doubt, one old fear pattern, one imperfect day could negate years of work. But it cannot, because the quantum occurrence is secured. An old fear is like unsolicited mail delivered to an address you no longer live at. It may still arrive for a while because systems have inertia, but it has no authority over you unless you leave your new residence, travel back to the old address, and decide to live there again. Otherwise, it is simply old information, a reverberation with no source noise echoing in a room you have already exited. Once you understand this, your methodology must change. Your task is no longer to be the active generator in a state of strain. Your task is to become the practitioner of active allowance. Active allowance is not passivity. Passivity is abandonment, giving up because you feel defeated. Active allowance is sovereign. It is the calm, confident posture of someone who has issued a command and knows it is being executed. It is the steady presence of a master who trusts the system not because they are naive, but because they understand the mechanics. You stop forcing the river. The river is already flowing in the direction you set. Your role is to navigate your vessel, to make minor adjustments, to steer around rocks, to keep your balance, to read the current. You do not create the current through panic. You cooperate with it through clarity. You observe. You allow. You approve. And this leads to the most crucial transformation required in this phase, an identity transformation. As long as you see yourself as a seeker, you are living inside absence. A seeker is someone who is not yet found. As long as you see yourself as a manifester, you may also be living inside absence, because manifesting can subtly imply you are still trying to bring something into existence that is not yet here. These identities have served you. They got you to the threshold. They taught you discipline, devotion, focus, but they cannot accompany you across the doorway. To finalize the finalization sequence, you must release the identity of the vault technician. You must stop acting like the constructor. You must become the resident. The seeker scans the horizon and asks, "Is it working?" The resident notices the indicators and says, "Of course it is. It is already done." The seeker performs rituals to make something happen. The resident performs rituals to celebrate what has happened and to align their body with the life they now live. The seeker lives in hope. The resident lives in knowing. This does not mean the resident is arrogant or detached. It means the resident has stopped negotiating with reality from a posture of pleading. They have moved into partnership. They have moved into ownership. They have moved into the steady certainty that what was authorized at the quantum level will arrive in form at the appropriate pace. You are no longer the person hoping to enter the house. You are the owner watching the movers carry your belongings in. Your job is not to beg the door to open. It is to decide where things belong. It is to approve what matches the new residence and release what does not. It is to stand in the doorway with calm authority and say, "Yes, that comes with me. No, that does not." This revelation is not abstract comfort. It is not philosophical decoration. It is a principle, and principles in any domain, physics, biology, psychology, produce evidence. If your new reality exists at the quantum level, it will leave impressions on the window of your perception. It will knock on the edges of your day. It will alter patterns. It will produce strange alignment. It will collapse certain structures and strengthen others. The world will begin to behave differently around you, not because you are imagining it, but because your relationship with it has changed at the level where choices are born. So you are not waiting for it to happen. You are learning to recognize the evidence that it is already happening. You are becoming a detective, not hunting for proof out of insecurity, but noticing proof as a natural consequence of a beautifully orchestrated transition already in motion. And as you learn to perceive these impressions as verifications rather than complications, something remarkable occurs. Fear loosens. Anxiety quiets. The frantic energy drains from your system. You stop arguing with the process. You stop trying to interpret every wave as a warning. You become the calm, centered observer of an arrival that is inevitable because it has already been initiated. Now, as we move into the next part, understand this: there are three primary indicators, three common impressions of the quantum finalization sequence that appear in the three-dimensional world like fingerprints of the unseen mechanism. You are already experiencing at least one of them. And once you can name it properly, you will no longer fight it. Because the first indicator is the most dramatic and the most misunderstood. And it is the one that convinces people falsely that everything is going wrong, when in fact it is the clearest sign that everything is finally working. It is called the dissolution, the first and most dramatic impression of the quantum finalization sequence. This is the sudden, often shocking collapse of something you believed was stable, permanent, and non-negotiable in your previous life. It can look like a position that evaporates overnight, a relationship that ends without warning, a plan that disintegrates in a single conversation, or a belief framework that fractures in one clarifying instant. To the outside observer, and to the part of you designed for survival, dissolution registers as loss, as failure, as catastrophic reversal. But from a quantum interpretation, it is none of those things. It is not loss. It is energetic demolition. You have to understand the principle beneath it: frequency, resonance, and decoherence. A reality is not just a set of circumstances. It is a coherent pattern. What you believe, what you tolerate, what you expect, what you repeatedly choose, what you unconsciously rehearse. Over time, that pattern becomes structurally stable. It forms a prevailing wave configuration, your default life. And because it is familiar, your nervous system learns to treat it as safe, even when it is quietly suffocating you. The new reality you have secured, the one you have authorized at the quantum stratum, vibrates at a higher frequency than the previous one. Higher frequency here is not a vague spiritual compliment. It points to coherence, integrity between what you desire and what you embody, alignment between your values and your actions, a cleaner energetic signal with less self-betrayal. When that new signal begins to stabilize and transmit into your physical experience, it functions as a dissolving agent to the lower frequency constructs of your history. They are incompatible. They cannot coexist in the same space-time location. Not because the universe is cruel, but because coherence is mathematically unforgiving. A life built from compromise cannot stabilize beside a life built from truth. A relationship sustained by small betrayals cannot endure beside a self that no longer abandons itself. A career that requires you to fragment your spirit cannot remain intact beside a consciousness that has learned wholeness. The old constructs were held together by the adhesive of your old identity, who you believed you were, what you believed you could have, what you believed you had to accept. And once that identity begins to dissolve the structures it supported lose integrity. They must, by the logic of resonance, fall away. This is not punishment. It is physics. It is decoherence doing its work, the wave of possibility collapsing into a definite new outcome, and everything out of phase with that outcome losing its place. This is why dissolution can feel both terrifying and strangely inevitable. It is the moment the old life realizes it can no longer persuade you to stay. Consider a narrative that illustrates the mechanism. A legal professional invests a decade constructing a flawless career. She is respected, financially secure, objectively successful. From the outside, it looks like stability. But underneath, she is silently unfulfilled. Her deeper intention, her soul's unspoken agreement with life, is to work with the natural world, to become an environmental steward, to use her intelligence, not to win arguments, but to protect what is living. For years, she does the internal work. She meditates not as escapism, but as rehearsal. She imagines the wind on her face and earth in her hands. She feels the pace of a different day, the quiet satisfaction of meaningful labor. Eventually, she reaches internal knowing, not wishful thinking knowing. It feels complete, and then dissolution begins. A corporate restructuring no one anticipated eliminates her entire department. Her secure position, her identity, her 10-year plan gone in an afternoon. Her logical mind screams disaster. The survival system activates fear, grief, humiliation, panic. But underneath the panic, there is an unexpected quiet, a resonance that feels like liberation. That is the signature. Dissolution does not only break things, it unhooks you. When the old constructs fall away, there is fear, yes, but it is accompanied by an uncanny sense of lightness. It does not feel like something has been ripped from you so much as a weight has been lifted. Even when you cry, something in you breathes. Even when you panic, something in you feels oddly honest. The event may be unwanted in form, but the energy beneath it is strangely aligned. That is how you can identify dissolution. It is a collapse that carries a hidden relief, because you are not witnessing a demolition you did not authorize. You are witnessing the scheduled clearing of a construction site to make room for a structure you already designed. The ground has to be cleared. The old beams have to come down. The incompatible materials must be removed. Only then can the new architecture stand without distortion. And this is where the earlier revelation becomes essential. The new reality is not maybe. It is not a distant dream. It has already been authorized at the level where outcomes are born. So dissolution is not the universe taking something from you and leaving you empty. It is the universe removing what cannot come with you because the door is already opening. Now, as much as dissolution is dramatic, it is only the first impression. The second quantum impression is more subtle, more refined, and for many people even more confusing, precisely because it does not feel like the miracle they expected. It is called resonance. Resonance is the interval where synchronicities begin to multiply: symbols, numbers, names, conversations, opportunities directly connected to your new reality. Yet they arrive with a strange neutrality. They do not always trigger fireworks. They do not necessarily feel magical. They feel like data. This is a crucial distinction because the old model of manifestation often trains people to chase emotional intensity as proof. It suggests that the more excited you feel, the more aligned you are. But in this stage, excitement is not the marker. Neutrality is. Why? Because high emotion is frequently the signature of separation. We become intensely emotional around what we want but do not yet believe is ours. The wonder of a miracle is rooted in its improbability. When something feels impossible, the nervous system spikes. The heart races. The mind says, how could this be happening? That emotional charge is evidence of distance between where you are and where you think the thing is. Resonance, by contrast, is evidence that distance is closing. When the indicators appear without an emotional spike, it means your subconscious is normalizing the new reality. It is no longer a fantastical aspiration. It is becoming a simple, observable inevitability. Scientifically, you can think of resonance as frequency verification. Your new reality begins to send low-energy informational transmissions into your perceptual field to test the pathways, to ensure the connection is stable, that the channel between consciousness and environment is clear. It is not tempting you. It is calibrating you. It is integrating the symbols of your future into your present so that when the full materialization arrives, it does not shock your system. It feels natural. It feels like arrival rather than intrusion. Imagine a man whose intention is to relocate to a small coastal town in Portugal. He has done the work. He has sensed the reality of it internally. Now resonance begins. In one day, he walks past a travel agency, and the poster displays the exact town he has been holding. He turns on the radio, and a Portuguese song is playing. A friend contacts him unexpectedly to say they started learning Portuguese. He opens a book, and a character is eating a pastel de nata. The specificity is too dense to ignore. The volume is statistically absurd, and yet he feels almost nothing. No dramatic thrill, no tears, no sign from heaven energy. He simply observes, there it is again. Interesting. That calmness is the marker. He is not responding like a seeker begging for proof. He is responding like a project manager, observing checklist items being completed. The data is arriving. The connection is stable. The system is normalizing. It is functioning. Resonance is often mistaken for nothing special, and that misinterpretation can be dangerous because people begin to doubt it. They say, if this were real, I would feel more. But that assumption belongs to an earlier stage. In this stage, the absence of dramatic emotion is the proof that the new reality is close enough to be ordinary. Then we arrive at the third impression, the most profound, the most unnerving, and the one that causes more people to abandon the process just before the door opens than any other. It is called the void. The void is an interval of profound stillness, emptiness, sometimes even neutrality. Inspiration evaporates. Synchronicities pause. The outer world becomes quiet. The noise of chaos diminishes. There is no obvious forward propulsion. To the ego, which thrives on movement, progress, and measurable change, this feels like failure. It feels like abandonment. It feels like the connection has been severed and you are on the wrong path. But the void is not stagnation, and it is not termination. It is zero-point recalibration. This is where we touch the most advanced concept in the entire sequence, the moment between waves. The silent gap where the dominant wave configuration of your previous reality has fully dematerialized, and the wave configuration of your new reality is about to materialize. The field returns to zero-point pure potential, not as a punishment, but as a recalibration chamber. Your energetic system is being adjusted to the exact set point of the new reality. It is as if the operating system is being upgraded and the screen goes dark for a moment, while the installation completes. You are not being rejected. You are being prepared. The void is the cosmic pause while the system initializes. Think of a performance hall, the silence right before the symphony begins. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of concentrated power. The musicians are ready. The audience holds its breath. The conductor lifts the baton. That silence is not absence. It is threshold. Or consider an artist who has been painting frantically for months, pouring intention into a future solo exhibition. She has done the work. She has embodied success. And then abruptly, the void arrives. For 3 weeks, she cannot even look at a brush. She feels empty of ideas, devoid of passion. The silence is deafening. She becomes convinced she has lost her gift permanently. Her ego interprets the void as proof she failed. Eventually, she surrenders not by giving up her dream, but by stopping the force. And in the stillness, something new begins to form. A new style emerges in her mind, fully formed, unlike anything she has ever created. 2 weeks later, a gallery owner she has never met contacts her after seeing an old piece online offering an exhibition because they are searching for something new and revolutionary. That is the signature of the void neutrality without regression. There is no obvious backward slide into the old reality, but there is no visible forward surge either. It feels like a pause button has been pressed on your life. Your drive disappears, but so does the sharp despair. You are empty, but not destroyed. You are quiet, but not hopeless. It is an unnerving stillness, yet it carries a subtle stability. And here's the instruction that matters most if you are in the void: do not panic. Do not rush to fill it. Do not try to fix it. Do not chase stimulation to convince yourself you are alive. Let the field clear. Let the installation complete. Be still, not because you are passive, but because you are wise enough not to interrupt the recalibration. In the earlier framework, you may have tried to treat stillness as a problem. You may have labeled it laziness, depression, failure, disconnection. But now you understand the void is not empty space to be occupied. It is sacred space to be honored. It is where the old has already dissolved and the new is gathering itself just beyond perception. Dissolution. Resonance. Void. These are not random experiences. They are impressions, evidence, marks left by a transition already authorized. Dissolution clears what cannot come. Resonance verifies the channel and normalizes the symbols. The void recalibrates you to the exact set point so that when the new reality arrives in form, your nervous system can hold it. And when you learn to read these indicators accurately, you stop fighting the process. You stop interpreting necessary demolition as personal rejection. You stop misreading neutral synchronicity as not enough. You stop labeling sacred stillness as abandonment. You become the resident, not the seeker, the one who knows the movers are already on the way, even if the house is quiet for a moment before the key turns. If you are experiencing dissolution, let what falls fall. If you are experiencing resonance, notice the data without chasing it. If you are experiencing the void, honor the pause. The door is closer than it appears. The silence is not the end. It is the breath before arrival. These are not obstacles. They are not examinations. They are quantum impressions, evidence marks left by a future that has already transpired at the level where outcomes are authorized. They are the reverberations of a bell that has already been sounded. They are the receipt for a transaction that is already finalized. And you understand this now, not as an attractive idea, but as something you have witnessed inside your own lived experience. You have felt the dissolution. You have tracked the resonance. You have endured the void. You have seen how each stage arrives with a signature that the old mind misreads and how the new understanding changes everything. So now it is time to stop analyzing and begin finalizing. It is time to move beyond intellectual conviction and into cellular certainty, the kind of knowing that does not argue with itself, the kind that settles into your tissues like warmth after a long cold season. This is not another visualization performed to generate something in the future. This is a ceremony of acceptance for what has already been generated. It is the moment you consciously rotate the final key in the lock. It is the shift from, is it coming to, it is here. It is the last gentle instruction you give your nervous system. Stop scanning. Stop negotiating, stop racing, because the agreement is already signed. Find a space where you can be undisturbed for a few minutes. Sit upright in a way that feels relaxed but dignified, like someone who is not pleading but receiving. When you are ready, allow your eyes to close softly, not as an escape from the world, but as a return to the field beneath the world where your deepest decisions were made. Let us perform the finalization ceremony. Draw a slow, deep breath in, filling your lungs completely. And as you exhale, release the identity of the seeker. Release the part of you that has been striving, hoping, working with such intensity. Let it dissolve. You do not need to punish that part of you. You can honor it because it carried you to this threshold. But you do need to release it because the seeker was designed for distance, and you are no longer in distance. You are in arrival. Take another deep breath in. And as you exhale, release the need to understand every mechanism. Release the analytical mind that insists on mapping each step, anticipating each turn, controlling each variable. That work has already been done. You have already studied the pattern. You have already learned the language of the indicators. Now the mind can rest, because resting is not negligence. It is trust. Now bring your awareness away from the noise of thought. Let it pass through the layers of emotion without clinging. Past the currents of sensation without judgment. Beneath the commentary, beneath the narrative, beneath the rehearsed fears, there is a vast, quiet field of pure consciousness, the part of you that can witness without panic. This is the quantum field. This is the womb of all generation. It is not created by your effort. It is what you are when effort is set down. In this quiet space, sense the reality you chose. Do not try to picture it with the mind's eye. Do not strain to construct it with imagination. That is the work of the generator, and the generative act is complete. Instead, sense its existence as a finished energetic structure. It is already here. It is stable. It is coherent. It is waiting not to be built, but to be inhabited. Notice how it presents itself. For some people, it arrives as gentle pressure in the chest, like the calm weight of certainty. For others, it arrives as warmth. For others, it is a magnetic pull, a quiet gravitation toward a version of life that feels inevitable. Sometimes, it is simply knowing, wordless, unshakable. Let it be whatever it is for you. You are not forcing an experience. You are recognizing one. Sense its stability, its permanence. This is not a possibility you are hoping for. This is a destination where you have already arrived at the quantum level. Stay with that sensation. Let it deepen. Let it become ordinary. Let it become the baseline of your inner atmosphere. Now, from within this completed reality, look back without anxiety, without urgency, at the final stages of transition as memories, not as crises still unfolding, but as a journey that has already concluded. This is the shift that finalizes the process, the ability to remember what you are still living through, as if it has already resolved. Not as denial, but as alignment with the deeper timeline where it is done. Bring to awareness the memory of dissolution. Recall that moment when a component of the old dimension collapsed, an ending that startled you, a structure that fell, a tether that snapped, the job that disappeared, the relationship that dissolved, the belief that fractured. From where you stand now, see it for what it truly was, the necessary demolition of a structure that could not exist inside the reality you now inhabit. Feel the relief of knowing it is complete. It is in the past. It did its work. It cleared space. You can even thank it, not because it felt pleasant, but because it was precise. Now bring to awareness the memory of resonance. Recall the flood of synchronicities, persistent symbols, repeating words, numbers, conversations, subtle alignments that seem to follow you. Notice how at the time you may have wanted them to feel more dramatic, to feel like miracles. But from your new vantage point, you see them as frequency verification. The system testing the channel, integrating the symbols of the incoming reality into your perception. They were confirmations, not teasers. They were stability checks, not games. Feel the peace of knowing the channel is now clear. The connection is stable. That phase is complete. Finally, bring to awareness the memory of the void. Remember that interval of stillness and neutrality, the cosmic pause that once frightened you. Notice from here how sacred it was, the silence between the last note of the old symphony and the first note of the new. The 0 point recalibration, the breath the field held before rendering your new dimension into form. Feel gratitude for that stillness. It was not abandonment. It was power collecting itself. Now bring your full awareness to the center of your being. Sense the energy of your body, the space you occupy, the simple fact of your presence. You are the owner of this new reality. You established the combination long ago, and now you are simply present as the final automated mechanism engages. Sense perhaps for a subtle vibration assembling in your field, a resonant hum that signals final alignment. You may feel a settling, a quiet finality descending into your nervous system. The great components you set in motion are falling into their place, and then perhaps there is a click. Not necessarily a sound, but a moment, a wave of peace, a release in the gut, a softness behind the eyes, an internal yes, that is undeniable. That is the vault sealing, not sealing you out, but sealing you in. The negotiation is concluded. The bargaining is over. The striving is complete. The hoping is complete. The anxiety of am I doing it right dissolves. What remains is the stable peace of being here, of being home. Not as a fantasy, but as a baseline. Sit with the felt sense of home, not arriving, but having already arrived, not achieving, but inhabiting. This is your new residence. Now ask yourself what single word names the essence of this residence. It could be peace, freedom, solidity, certainty, clarity, safety, expansion. Choose one, not because you are forcing a feeling, but because you are naming a frequency. Hold that word gently. Let it become your anchor and your key. Let it fill your body, not as emotion, but as identity. And now with that word held softly and awareness begin to return. Feel the physical sensations of your body, the weight of your legs, the contact with the ground, the air on your skin. Draw a slow, deep breath as if you are breathing the air of your new reality. And when you are ready, open your eyes. Nothing in the room has necessarily changed, and yet everything is different. Because the agreement is authorized, the lock is engaged, the inner war is over. Welcome home. From this point forward, you function as a steward of your new reality. A steward does not generate. A steward nurtures what already exists. The architect designs. The construction crew builds. But it is the steward who maintains the structure, walks the corridors, ensures the environment remains coherent and flourishing. The era of heavy machinery is complete. The era of stewardship begins. This is the critical identity shift from the effort of becoming to the ease of being. Not ease as laziness, but ease as coherence, the natural state of someone no longer divided against themselves. Here are the 3 core practices of a reality steward, tools you will use not to get your breakthrough, but to manage the reality that has already arrived. The first tool is conscious acknowledgement. For weeks, months, perhaps years, you were scanning for signs, desperate for evidence. That phase is finished. Now you do something different. Instead of passively noticing an indicator and feeling a brief spark of hope, you actively acknowledge it with calm authority. This matters because your attention is not neutral. It is a stabilizing force. In the language of quantum metaphor, your focused, coherent awareness acts like an observer effect. It collapses the wave into form more rapidly by adding certainty to the field. When you consciously acknowledge an indicator without desperation, without clinging, you feed the new reality and starve the old. You are not begging the universe, you are confirming the selection. The acknowledgement is simple and specific. When something aligns, you say internally, yes. That is part of my new baseline. When the old reality attempts to reassert itself, you do not panic. You recognize it as residue and you say no. That belongs to the old address. This is not magical thinking. It is energetic boundary setting. It is identity maintenance. The second tool is selective interpretation. A steward does not interpret every disruption as a crisis. You now know the 3 impressions: dissolution, resonance, void. So when turbulence appears, you ask what is dissolving. When synchronicity appears, you ask what is being verified. When stillness appears, you ask what is recalibrating. This keeps you from feeding fear with false meaning. It prevents you from rebuilding the old structure out of panic. It keeps you aligned with the architecture already being installed. The third tool is coherent action. Small, grounded behaviors that match the new residents. Not frantic action to force results, but calm, consistent choices that express identity. A steward maintains order. A steward protects the environment. A steward nurtures what is alive. In practical terms, this means you live as someone who belongs here. You keep promises to yourself. You guard your attention. You choose relationships that match your frequency. You take actions that respect your future rather than soothe your past. You do not do this to earn arrival. You do it because you have arrived. And as you practice these tools, you will notice something. The final stages stabilize faster. Not because you are pushing, but because you are no longer interfering with fear. You are no longer arguing with the process. You are cooperating with what is already true. So when you see an indicator now, you do not spiral into analysis. You do not demand reassurance. You acknowledge it. You approve it. You let it confirm what you already know. The new reality is installed, and the physical world is simply catching up. Yes, that one. And with each calm acknowledgement, you add your coherent signature to the field until the evidence no longer arrives as signs, but as your ordinary life. Finalize that one. Here is how you execute it in a way that matches the identity you have just claimed, the identity of stewardship, not seeking. The instant you notice an indicator, an echo of your intention inside a conversation, a symbol that repeats with improbable precision, a synchronicity that lands too cleanly to be dismissed, or even a piece of dissolution that confirms the old structure is no longer holding, you will pause. This is the first discipline. You do not let the moment rush by. Most people have trained themselves to overlook evidence because they are still bracing for disappointment. Or they notice it and immediately sprint past it because the old nervous system is addicted to urgency. But you are no longer living from urgency. You are living from authority. So you halt what you are doing. You draw one deep, calm breath, and then internally or spoken softly aloud, you issue the command that finalizes the moment. Acknowledgement received. Stabilization sequence authorized. Thank you. 3 short phrases. Precise, simple, powerful. Acknowledgement received means I saw it. I witnessed the signal. I am not asleep in my own life. I do not dismiss what is being shown to me. Stabilization sequence authorized means I am the owner of this reality. I grant permission for this selection to secure. I am not negotiating. I am confirming. Thank you means I am grateful not as a desperate person trying to earn, but as a resident recognizing what is already underway. Gratitude here is not an emotional performance. It is a frequency. It signals completion. It communicates I understand the delivery is already dispatched. I'm simply receiving the tracking update with calm. And that is the entire practice. You are not begging. You are not pleading. You are not asking, will it happen? You are issuing a sober confirmation. Proceed. Now notice the most common error people make at this point. They witness an indicator and snap back into the energy of the seeker. They get overly excited, a giddy, almost frantic rush. Oh my God, it's working. It's finally working. That emotional peak can feel pleasant, but it is often the frequency of surprise. It subtly signals that you did not expect success, that some part of you still believed it might not be yours. Shock is not knowing. It is disbelief in disguise. The energy of stewardship is different. It is calm. It is sovereign. It is final. It is what a leader does when something they ordered arrives exactly on schedule. Envision a CEO who requested a report. When it lands on their desk, they do not leap up and down, as if the universe has granted them a miracle. They scan it, nod, and say, "Excellent. Proceed." That is the tone of conscious acknowledgement, detached, certain, composed. Not indifferent, just no longer hungry, no longer pleading, no longer hoping. This simple practice matters because it trains your nervous system to treat alignment as normal. Each time you pause and acknowledge an indicator calmly, you are telling the deeper layers of your psyche, this reality is no longer special. It is not distant. It is not improbable. It is baseline. The second practical tool of stewardship is timeline filtering. Even as your new reality secures, you will still experience lingering thoughts, habits, fears, and memories from the previous timeline. This is inevitable. The old configuration had momentum. It transmitted for years. Of course, it leaves residue. But residue is not authority. These are not indicators of failure. They are not proof you are being pulled back. They are reverberations, informational remnants from a deprecated system. They are like echoes in a hallway you have already walked through. They have no creative power unless you supply them with your life force, your attention, your belief, your emotional charge. This is where many people misunderstand the process and accidentally reanimate what is already dying. They struggle against old thoughts as if those thoughts are dangerous. They fear them as if they can reset everything. And that fear becomes energy fuel. Timeline filtering is the art of handling these remnants with grace and efficiency without making them important. The scientific metaphor here is simple. Imagine an old email archive. Those emails contain subject lines from past dramas, old anxieties, outdated versions of you. You can see them in the archive. You do not need to open them. You do not need to reread them. Their presence in the archive does not mean the crisis is happening again. It means the record exists. The journey happened, and it is complete. So when a fear from the previous reality emerges, a worry about resources, a pang of isolation, a flash of inadequacy, a doubt about your capability, the first step is not resistance. You do not shove it away. You do not plaster affirmations on top of it. You do not rush to fix it. You simply label it. Calmly, internally, data from timeline B. Archive. Reverberation. The label does something profound. It prevents identification. The thought is no longer me or truth. It becomes an object data, an artifact from a system that is no longer dominant. And after you label it, you acknowledge it without emotional engagement. You notice it like you would notice unsolicited mail. You do not argue with the envelope. You do not panic about the stamp. You simply recognize this does not belong to my current address. Then you discard it gently without trauma and return your focus to the sensation state of your new reality, to your anchor word, to the calm certainty you embodied in your ceremony. Label, acknowledge, refocus. That is timeline filtering. It is elegant, efficient, and powerful precisely because it refuses to energize the old. The most common mistake here is panic. Oh no, I'm thinking a negative thought. I'm going to ruin my materialization. But that panic is the very act that grants the reverberation energy. It is like discovering an old unplugged lamp in the corner and becoming terrified it might somehow turn on, so you run across the room, plug it into the socket, and stare at it to see if it works. In your fear, you give it electricity. These reverberations cannot pull you back unless you make them dominant. Your new reality now has more mass, more momentum, a stronger gravitational pull. The old fears are not a planet. They are tiny asteroids drifting in the wake. Let them pass. You are the planet. Now we come to the third tool, perhaps the most transformative for long-term stability, the integration ritual. The purpose of this tool is to make your new reality feel mundanely normal. This is critical because your subconscious accepts as real what is repetitive, ordinary, and consistent. Exceptions, miracles, rare events do not form a baseline. A baseline is built by routine. Your aim is to convert your intention from something special you are hoping for into something ordinary you live inside. We do this by anchoring the new reality into a small, repeatable physical action. The principle is neurobiological. The subconscious learns through repetition, not intensity. Intensity can inspire you for a day. Repetition rewires you for a life. By performing a small daily ritual associated with your new reality, you send a steady low-level signal to your deeper mind. This is who we are now. This is what we do. And because the signal is calm and consistent, it bypasses the critical, doubtful layer of the conscious mind. It installs normality. Here's how you create your integration ritual. Select one aspect of your intended reality and design a simple 5-minute daily practice around it. Not a grand manifestation ceremony, not something dramatic, but something that feels like maintenance. Something that implies, this is already my life. If your new reality includes abundant resources, your ritual might be 5 minutes each morning, reviewing your financial tools, tracking one expense, organizing a budget category, or checking a savings plan. Not with the energy of I hope money comes, but with the energy, this is normal. It is mundane. It is what resourced people do. If your new reality is a fulfilling vocation, your ritual might be 5 minutes at the end of the day, organizing your workspace, planning tomorrow's priorities, or updating a portfolio. Not to attract the career, but because this is the habit of someone already operating in their professional identity. The act is small. The identity signal is enormous. If your breakthrough is a loving partnership, your ritual might be preparing your bed each morning with quiet care, smoothing the other pillow, leaving space without longing, but with certainty, like a household already shared in spirit. Or perhaps it is 5 minutes of nurturing your own capacity for intimacy, journaling one honest sentence, practicing one boundary, sending one message of appreciation to someone safe. Again, not as seeking, but as normal. The content of the ritual is less important than its energetic tone. The tone must be ordinary, steady, undramatic. The biggest error is trying to make the ritual feel magical. People load it with intense emotion, grand visualizations, dramatic declarations, and then they wonder why it cannot be sustained. But the point of the integration ritual is to strip the intention of specialness. Specialness implies separation. This is rare, distant, extraordinary. Normality implies integration. This is my life, I maintain it. You are not trying to manifest a miracle. You are learning to live a reality. So you make it routine, like hygiene, like nourishment, like tending a home. Quiet, unassuming, repeated. This is what convinces the deepest parts of you that the transformation is not approaching. It is here. Now step back and recognize what you have gained. You can identify the quantum finalization sequence in real time. You have moved through acceptance. You have learned to interpret dissolution resonance and void not as threats, but as evidence. And you now hold 3 practical methodologies to stabilize your new reality without strain. 1. Conscious acknowledgement, calm confirmation of indicators. 2. Timeline filtering, graceful dismissal of old reverberations. 3. Integration, ritual repetition that makes the new normal. The work of generation, the striving, the pleading, the exhausting attempt to hold the frequency through force is complete. You have arrived. And this is not a small statement. The person who began this transmission is not the same person listening now, because your foundation has shifted from hope to knowing. But here's the next truth: securing a new reality is like arriving in a new country. Your passport is stamped. You are legally a resident. Yet you do not speak the language fluently. You do not yet know the customs. You have not learned the subtle cues that separate a tourist from a native. The next phase is not attainment. It is integration. It is embodiment at a level most people never consider. The question is no longer how do I get there? The question becomes how do I live from here? How do you recalibrate your identity, habits, relationships, and moment-to-moment decisions so you do not merely survive in this higher frequency environment, but thrive, become its master? You opened the vault and secured its contents, but the vault was only one chamber in a mansion you now own. In a strange way, the journey is not ending. It is beginning. When a high-frequency reality stabilizes, it exerts gravitational pull. Everything in its orbit must rise to match it or be released. That includes thoughts, beliefs, connections, and even the cellular patterns in your body. This creates what we can call integration turbulence, the invisible pressure your new reality places on everything in your life that is not yet a vibrational match. If you do not manage this consciously, you can drift back, not because the new reality disappears, but because familiarity can seduce you into old habits. The previous timeline may be deprecated, but its patterns can still whisper. Its comfort can still tempt. The art of quantum integration becomes the single most important skill you develop now, because it is what makes your breakthrough permanent. It is what removes the magnetic charge from the old reality until it can no longer pull you. And once you master integration, your breakthrough stops being a destination and becomes a launch pad. Because the nature of expansion is that it continues. Each new reality you inhabit becomes the foundation for the next refinement, the next upgrade, the next level of coherence. So before you leave this moment, take one final act of stewardship. Name your anchor. Choose one word that captures the energy you are embodying from this instant forward: peace, certainty, freedom, steadiness, clarity, solidity, devotion, trust. Just one word. Not as casual interaction, but as an energetic signature. A declaration to the field and to yourself: I have received this transmission, and I am living from it. You are not the vault technician anymore, listening anxiously for clicks. You are the owner of the mansion, walking through rooms that already belong to you. Your work now is not to strive, but to inhabit, not to hope, but to know. Go forward from this place of certainty,